Hello, my name is John Jungman, Superintendent of the Liberty Public Schools, and I'm here to give you a short informational update on the current state of affairs and finances for Liberty Public Schools and some information about what is in the upcoming levy question. In the next few minutes, I'll provide information on several slides, and I'll also provide you an opportunity and location to find more information in the days and weeks to come as we lead up to the levy question ballot, or the ballot question on November 5th. So let's get rolling. Let me start with finances. I think it's important that we have to understand our financial picture in Liberty Public Schools. And what I would hope that you see is that Liberty Public Schools is a big system. We've grown a lot in the last decade, and we have a $130 million budget total. This graph points to some very important numbers, and it's important to see that the big piece of the pie is this is a people business and continues to be and will always be. Education is a people business. $93 million of the district's budget goes to support people, whether that be bus drivers, cooks, custodians, teachers, leadership. We have over 1,500 total employees. In addition, you'll see some other pieces of the pie, smaller pieces that deal with our debt service and our lease, and that helps pay off the current facility expenditures that we have in place. That's about 10%, just a little bit over 10% of our entire budget. We also have a large chunk that goes to materials and supplies and purchase services, and that total equals just about 17% of our budget. It's important to note that that's not just books and technology, that's food in the cafeteria, that's gas in our buses, that's paying for the lights and the energy that we consume on a daily basis. So that's another large chunk of our budget. So $130 million budget total. The majority of that going to people, and 81% of the operating budget, 4 out of every $5, is put into the people in our system. Important also to note that how do we compare to our peers when it comes to that? And there's important, the most easy way to look at that is per pupil expenditure. These are 4 districts that are like us on the St. Louis side and 4 districts that are like us when it comes to demographics on the Kansas City side. We fall basically in the middle. Our average daily expenditure was just under $9,300 last year. And you see that the average for the peers is just over $9,700. And once again, you'll see we lie in the middle. There are some extremes, and there are at both the low end and at the high end, but Liberty Public Schools is basically about average when compared to peers on how much we're spending annually per child. Additionally, assessed valuation is something that's important for us to understand, and the assessed valuation is the property wealth of a system. That includes all of our houses, our industry, our cars, all of the things that people pay property taxes on. Our system has $861 million of assessed valuation in it currently. That is broken down to $76,000 per child. As compared to our peers, that is the lowest on the list. And that drives us into some of our levy struggles. It causes us to have, as you'll see on this next chart, one of the highest levies in the region and the state because we have low assessed valuation per child as compared to our peers. So Liberty Public Schools currently has a 609 levy. It's the second highest on this chart. Lee Summit is the only one that's just a fraction higher. The bad news is that 609 levy is only generating $4,652 locally per child. When you compare us to our peers, Blue Springs at a 572 levy, so several cents less, is generating $300 more. You compare us to Lee Summit, another local school who has just that 1 penny more in levy, but they are generating almost $1,000 more per child. You compare us to Park Hill, who is another neighbor who has a levy that's 70 cents less than ours, and they're generating nearly $3,000 more locally per child, causing our voters and patrons to have a higher levy in order to provide the same kind of resource base for our kids. Now, what's supposed to happen is the state is supposed to help when there are shortfalls when it comes to assessed valuation and try to balance things, and they do that through what's called the foundation formula. The bad news is the state's revenues aren't hitting where they would like for them to be, and they're not being able to they have not been able to allocate enough money to fund the formula. So districts that are more dependent on the formula to equalize are also more damaged when it comes to these times because they can't generate as much locally, and they're being shortchanged because the state is unable to meet their formula obligations. So currently, it's being underfunded by a little over 7%. That number equates to Liberty Public Schools to $3.7 million in foundation withholdings, basically. That's $328 a child in Liberty Public Schools, and that's the largest number as compared to our peers because we're the most state dependent because of our low assessed local evaluations. Our peers in Park Hill, once again, only being withheld $186 a child. So it's kind of the double whammy situation where you have a high levy because you have a low assessed valuation, your taxpayers have to pay a higher rate, and then when the state's unable to fund the obligations that are set forth in the formula, then it becomes more damaging to those districts that are more state dependent. So what's that mean? It means it's a challenge, and it's a challenge when you're growing, and we are continuing to grow. 11,600 students in our system this year, and projected out, if we continue to grow as demographers' projections have been accurate thus far, by 300 to 350 kids a year, we'll be over 14,000 students by the time we hit 2020. We already have 40 classrooms taking place in modular buildings. That's almost 1,000 kids being housed in those locations. So 14,000 kids coming our way. That's 2,500 additional on top of what we have today. So what has the board done? They went to a facility master planning project. They took the feedback from the 2011 levy failure and took that information and said, okay, what are we going to do now? We know we still have growth challenges. We know we have financial challenges. We have to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new plan, and that's exactly what they've done. They've spent over 12 months in a facility master planning process that's involved community stakeholders, that's investigated other districts outside of ours in order to find out what best practices are in order to come up with a new facility master plan. So what's that plan look like? Well, this is the diagram, and you can really look at this on the board document page. It really digs into the details, but I'll also show you some of the details. It's obviously fine print. You might not be able to read it on the screen right now. But it's got two phases. It's got a phase one that is part of the levy question right now, and then it has a phase two that would come about in approximately 2017 to 2019. And then it has a private fundraising component for those things that we see as needs and what other districts have, but we just cannot fit into our proposals. So there's a private fundraising component, which includes the district stadium and potential turf on fields and those things. So there are three parts to this facility master plan. So what's in it? Number one, new goals. The new goals start with maximize use of existing space. So we're going to take the space that we have and use it most effectively. We have a lot of square footage in this system, and our goal is to use it most effectively. It's our number one asset when it comes to physical assets. Number two, reduce square footage per learner by 2020. So as we continue to add square footage in the years to come, as more students come our way, how can we add differently so that we're not continuing to add at the same rate? And then number three, and this is very important, research and implement new practices. And that includes instructional, that includes scheduling, that includes using technology in new and different ways. We're going to have to use or do practices differently in order to make sure that we use that space differently. So the proposal is this, it's 36 cents. The board unanimously voted to support putting this ballot question before the voters, and it will happen on November 5th. It's 36 cents. And I'll talk to you about voter impact, what the cost is here in just a few minutes. But I think it's important to know, number one, why now and what's in it. So why now? Number one, the formula is underfunded, causing us to have a gap in our funding. Almost $4 million in foundation plus additional in transportation money that's being withheld. We're at 11,600 kids. We have 1,000 in modulars right now, and we have 2,500 more coming our way. So that's number two. And then the third part, and I haven't mentioned this yet, is that assessed valuation number I talked about earlier is not growing. If you look at it as compared to 2008, it is lower now than it was then. So while we've grown by 1,000 kids, we have not received local revenue on top of that because the assessed valuation number is flat, basically. So what's in the new plan? The new design, when we talk about using space differently, is really calling for additions instead of new facilities. That allows us to control operational costs. So these places that would get new space, the elementary sites would be Kellybrook, Lewis and Clark, Shoal Creek, and Warren Hills. 3 of those 4 sites already have mobile classrooms, and 1 would be slated to next year if we do not do anything different. Potential for a little bit of space at Liberty Middle School. It's the only middle school that after reconfiguration still needs a little space. and it will need it before phase 2. So our goal is to get a couple classrooms added at Liberty Middle. Obviously, we need some significant space at Liberty North. This would provide one new wing for classroom space, science labs, and it would also provide a track for that facility as it continues to grow into a full high school. It's over 1,400 students now and projected to grow out beyond 2,000 by the time that we reach 2020. So this would get one wing. Another wing would come in part of phase 2 around 2017, 2018. What else is in the plan? This is a perfect example of using space differently. The building that currently houses our district office would be moved into the Blue Jay Tower, where we have 2 floors that have been housed by Northwest in the past, but we need those to most efficiently take good use of our current space. So we would take over the 3rd and 4th floor, as well as relocate the academy from the 1st floor and move district offices into those locations. That would free up 30,000 square feet in the current district administrative center to turn into an elementary site. It would allow us to help with overflow and allow us to think differently about how we use our current space. And we feel like we could house somewhere between 300 and 400 students at that site without changing boundaries and without doing anything much different in the big scheme of how we use our space, but we would have to think about how we use this space flexibly because it wouldn't have a gym. It wouldn't have some of the things that wouldn't necessarily come with a traditional elementary, but we can still offer the programming by using our space different. Additionally, space at Liberty High for student wellness as well as competition. One of the consequences of moving freshmen into both high schools is there is a need for many more credits in physical education because freshmen that used to get those credits taken care of at the junior high level now need to do those at the high school. So we have an overabundance of need for physical education space that we can't house right now, or for kids in that space that we don't have space for right now. So this would provide a second gym at Liberty High that is a competition gym, as well as space for classrooms. We think we could get 4 to 6 classroom spaces out of this addition at Liberty High. Provide technology upgrades for K-8 students and staff. As we think about the future, we know that we're flipping how we use technology and putting it in the hands of kids more often and not just in labs. That allows us to use space different. So this would be a great example of opportunities for us to put technology in the hands of students at the K-8 level. It would not get us to a one-to-one environment, but it would provide us opportunities to upgrade our current student devices. Safety and security upgrades at multiple locations. We're trying to get secure vestibules at the entryway of all buildings over time, and this would allow us to move down that path. Any buildings that we touch as part of this project that don't have that would get that addition, so a secure vestibule addition. Other things that's important to note, this plan's a little different than 2011. Number one, I would say it's smaller. 43 cents was what the first question was. This is 36 cents, so 16% smaller. It reduces the overall construction cost from by 37% between now and 2020 of the original design that was going to kind of play out with the 2011 proposal. So it really helps us control our facility acquisition cost. It removes the district stadium component as a part of any levy. That would be done through a private fundraising option. In addition, it really helps us control operational cost. As we think about shrinking our square footage per learner, it really drives down that cost and allows us to push that cost into the classroom where it can best be used. Phases in the need over 7 years, so this is a multi-phase project, so this will phase in facilities over 7 years. It requires us to restructure space at all facilities. We're already doing that through the Liberty Leads project at both high schools with mobile technology, taking those classrooms that used to exist as labs and turning them into regular classrooms so that it keeps us from having to add as much space. So it restructures usage at all facilities, and it calls for no immediate boundary changes. It allows us to drive the current system of feeders from the elementary to the middle to the high school, and allows that to play out for the next 7 to 8 years without any changes. So we feel very good about no boundary changes and allowing the feeder system that's been put in place to work. So the overall taxpayer impact for a taxpayer that would have a $200,000 house approximately and $20,000 in personal property would pay $161 a year in additional taxes with this rate increase, or $13.50 per month if you want it broken down that way. Obviously, if your property's worth less than that, you can change how you calculate that, and if it's worth more. But $161 a year for $220,000 of assessed valuation would be the proposed or the estimated taxpayer impact. That really kind of summarizes kind of a small financial picture, as well as a little bit of information about the levy. And once again, I'm sure I didn't answer all questions, but this was to provide you with baseline understanding. What I would tell you, if you have clarifications that need made or questions that you would like to ask, contact Dallas Ackerman at the district office, myself. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have. Board members, all of us have been through the process of putting this facility master plan together, as well as understanding in detail each aspect of it. You can also go to the district website, www.liberty.k12.mo.us, and at that location you would find a button that provides you with FAQs and other information regarding this levy question. Once again, thank you so much for giving us a little time, and I hope you have a great day.